If your underwriting team spends more time wrestling PDFs than pricing risk, you are not alone. On a typical day, a single 50 megabytes email can land in an underwriter's inbox, bursting with spreadsheets, scan slips, and missing fields before anyone gets near a rater. And yes, much of it still gets rekeyed by hand. But here is the upside. Carriers that get AI right are already pulling ahead. Over the last 5 years, AI leaders in insurance created 6.1 times the total shareholder return of laggards. That kind of gap changes careers and combined ratios. Today, on the Scouting for Growth podcast, we are going to delve into the world of agentic underwriting, the move from manual triage to autonomous multi-agent systems that orchestrate intake, risk profiling, pricing, and compliance with human oversight. Think AI colleagues that parse submissions, surface the right third-party data, and route complex calls to underwriters while continuously learning from outcomes. Our guest is Amit Santhirasenan, co-founder and CEO of hyperexponential, also known under the name of HX, an actuary and software engineer who has built the AI-native pricing and underwriting platform used by leading specialty carriers. Amrit joined me last year, and I am so excited to welcome back Amrit today for an update just before ITC Vegas, the leading global insurance conference in the United States. Hyperexponential reports 50% faster submission to quote, 10 times faster rate to build and deployment, and supports $45 billion of GWP annually across 40 plus enterprise customers. These customers include names like Aegis, London, Aviva, Beazley, Conduit Re, Convex, HDI, Markel, and Longtail Re, among the so many others. Why should an executive lean in now? Yes, that is an important question. Because the baseline is broken. 86% of underwriters still spend 2 or more hours per day on annual data entry. 95% of US insurers say their pricing technology needs improvement, and over a third report losing business due to slow or inconsistent pricing. These data sets come from research that HX put together for the UK and the United States. That is margin left on the table and broker relationships strained before the first endorsement is signed. For you, transformation leaders, under board pressure to prove ROI, scale beyond pilots, and de-risk innovation, this conversation is built just for you. In the next 60 minutes, Amrit and I will cover 1. From attachment soup to decision intelligence, how to turn messy submissions into structured signals your pricing model can trust without hiring an army. 2. What agentic really means. Multi-agent architectures, the agentic AI mesh, and the human-in-the-loop controls executives need to have for auditability and speed. 3. The specialty playbook, or the PNC insurance playbook, actually, where agentic underwriting is ready today and where it is not. Plus the metrics. Executives should track cycle time, hit ratio, and loss ratio uplift. If your strategy is to move from decks to deals, from rekeying to real time, this episode is really for you. It will show you what good looks like and how to get there faster. So let's dive in and welcome Amrit to the Scouting for Growth podcast. Hello, hello, hello. Amrit, I'm so pleased to have you back with me.
Thanks for having me, Sabine. It's good to be back.
So let's just go straight into our conversation, because I want you to start our conversation with describing one of your experiences actually at Lloyd's of London. I know you come from Lloyd's, and maybe perhaps going and diving into one of those 50 megabyte submission emails we used to receive at the time. What has changed?
Yeah, great question. I always love reminiscing about Lloyd's with you. So I come from the era where I would see the brokers and claims handlers turn up in the lift with files in a suitcase. So the email submissions, that was a luxury at the start of my career. So it's amazing to think about how much it's changed today, hasn't it? You know, particularly with the kind of dawn of AI or generative AI in terms of untangling the viper's nests of these submissions, right? So we've gone from an era where data was, bound literally in physical PDFs all the way through to email-based submissions, people doing work much faster, but still very manually, through to the breakthrough we've had with LLM's ability to synthesize this data at pace. And, the thing that's been most exciting for me, because, I'm a self-professed, very proud nerd, is just to look at the pace at which the kind of capabilities of the core models have got so good that, in the space of 6 months, what historically, even 6 months ago was a whole product and capability and feature set is now, within the gift of Gemini or, GPT-5, right, or Claude. It's amazing really to see how much the change has come through.
How much change has come through, and I use all of them because I want to compare the results. And so it's fascinating, the speed of change, and I think it's important for us to realize that. So let's dive into specialty underwriting, right? We are in the age, as you said, of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, amongst others. Tell me, what is agentic underwriting for you? How do we move from the chaos of spreadsheets, PDFs, and emails within the underwriting sphere? And why do you believe artificial intelligence is now crucial to manage data complexity in our industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you'll know that although we sell and service more than just the specialty markets now. Our home, our core is the specialty space, and it's something that's personally very close to my heart. So I often reflect, right? If you were to think about your dream technology for a specialty and commercial underwriter, right? You've got this heterogeneous data. It's disgusting. It comes from 100 different data sets. And actually, the data that an underwriter and an actuary can cobble together is often a source of differentiation, right? And I think, if you were to think about the dream technologies to untangle all of that, it would be something, right, not far off what we see today in these LLMs. If you're a high throughput, high velocity, SME underwriter, the state of the art was pretty impressive, right? You look at some of our clients, the likes of Aviva, they're processing risks extremely quickly, even before Gen AI came along. But the breakthrough technology, I think, for specialty and commercial insurance to really break the back of that extremely kind of extreme morass of data is Gen AI, right? The ability to synthesize and analyze unstructured data from a variety of sources in a conversational way, in an exploratory way, right? That's the thing that I see really clearly. To build on that question about why is this important? Well, I think, and what's agentic underwriting? Well, the thing I tell my team is in the same way that maybe 15 years ago, no one would have imagined us doing all of our banking, living our day-to-day lives on one of these, right? I think there are lots of people that are really underestimating how much they will do their day-to-day jobs in symbiosis with a set of agents. Right. And so for HX, one of the visions that we have is for us to be the leading frontier provider of underwriting and actuarial support agents, right? Because that's just where the market's going to go. If you're an underwriter filling out a spreadsheet or a renew model, right? A spreadsheet, maybe 1996, maybe 2023 as a renew model, 2025 is working with the HX underwriting or actuarial agent inside a renew model to have your pair partner actually helping you get to the best result.
Can you tell us, you use a really key term, which I was using just last week with, the team at EY Microsoft. You use the term frontier. What does agentic frontier means for us in insurance?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is my life work, and so I spend a lot of my time thinking really about what this looks like. And I think, you know, insurance is just one of these incredible domains where I was talking to someone, I was doing a job interview this morning with someone, and I was explaining to them that you're not going to see that many places with a $7 trillion contribution to GDP, with such a small number of companies responsible for this, and such a small number of people in the grand scheme of things. Don't get me wrong, some of our clients are this, the size of cities, but it's still a very small number of people compared to many other sectors in the world. And so for me, the frontier is to think a little bit about like this very specialized in the grand scheme of things skill set, right? This specialized art and science of actuarial and underwriting and the IT work in insurance. How can we contribute to that? Right? What does it mean for us? Does it mean, and for HX, we will have the world's leading AI research team in insurance next year, right? What is it to like encapsulate the skills of an actuary, the subset of an LLM, these 170 billion, trillion parameter models, like what subset of those represents an actuarial or underwriting skill set? How can we
Yeah.
fine tune and optimize these models to do really, really, really great tasks in underwriting and actuarial? They probably don't need the complete works of Shakespeare, right? Some of the stuff that's embedded inside some of these models. So what does it mean? So for me, sorry to give you the focused answers, it's really looking at like what the applications of the leading technology that we see today, how those can be focused and really refined for the very actually quite unique, quite like specialized skills inside insurance. And that's what motivates me, right? I'm a technology nerd as well as an actuary at heart. So thinking a little bit about how we can tie those things together and do some of that work for our clients. It's super exciting stuff, actually.
It's leading edge. Some people said bleeding edge. And actually, when you start looking at our industry, our sector, and you've said, small amount of company being accountable for so much GDP, we are moving into a world where we have specialty exposure. The conversation I'm having every day with the Fortune 500 I work with is around emerging risk. So from cyber to marine to current societal changes, actually, Amrit, to, looking at changing faster with historical losses, historical data. How can underwriters stay ahead of these emerging risks that are affecting us leveraging AI?
Yeah, yeah. So when you asked me this question, it gave me nostalgia because I remember the very first presentation I did, the launch presentation of HX 7 years, nearly 8 years ago now, talking about how the fact that the frontier of the world's risks, our market, the specialty market, is the place where Apple, Tesco, John Lewis, right, where the leading providers in retail technology, they come to buy their insurance. Right.
Uh-huh.
And these companies are changing so fast. They've been changing for decades. And actually, us as a market, we haven't had the ability to keep up. And one of HX's core missions from the very beginning was to use technology to synthesize better data, right? To be able to actually keep up with the pace of change. Because our clients were getting more sophisticated in the way they were thinking about risk. Ironically, we were unable to do so. So HX's motivations, it feels so quaint now to talk about having an API or, a machine vision algorithm, right? To be able to pull some third-party data sets. I remember we demonstrated the first API machine vision algorithm in the market in 2017. Now that just feels like table stakes, right? Kids who come out of university are doing that for toy projects before they get to our clients. But now deep risk research, right? Why can't you have deep risk research on every single risk? Why can't you say, tell me the most important characteristics you can find in the world about the top 3 exposures I'm doing? No human could do this work, right? It was just the cost benefit trade-off, right? The frontier in different centers of the world, the cost benefit trade-off there isn't right. It wasn't economic, but actually you can run an OpenAI deep risk API call to go and do that on every single risk you underwrite today. And if you buy HX's underwriting agent, sorry, founder doing his bit of sales, right? We do it for you, right? Right. This is what we do. This is what we do. And so, I think it's all of a sudden making it dramatically easier to bring that level of differentiation and specialism in the way underwriting has always been done at the kind of at the very best the best underwriting to every single risk you want to touch, because you can have an army of digital agents helping you now, which
Yeah,
is just incredible, really, all for $20 a month.
it is
That's not how
incredible.
much HX costs.
I know, and what you just said is I think we need to unpack that, because I, do a lot of research, R&D for leading organization. And I currently have to do a piece of research where we have to read a lot of reports, not only annual reports, but also looking deep into all the research which has happened since the 1st of January of this year. So we found something like 100 reports. But because there's deep research, imagine once upon a time, which was before 2022 or 2023, I had to read all this stuff, right? I had to read the thousands of pages. But with deep research, now I can be asking questions, but then unpacking the information in different ways, leveraging my knowledge, my expertise, and my experience in the industry to answer the question. Like you would actually say, the same things would happen with an underwriter. So what gaps do traditional models miss out that you're able to solve today, Amrit?
Yeah, we're always looking to close those gaps because I think if you look at the models in the world been built over the last 20 years, they just haven't changed very much, right? Notwithstanding the fantastic advancements in the calibration, rate making, benchmarking space of actuarial work, right? The GLM side of things, and obviously more advanced machine learning models now. GLMs have been wonderful for 20 years, but they're not the state of the art anymore. There's so much more that can be done now in the analytical world. And so for me, I think when I think about this question, I think it's like actually less important about the model is what information can we surface? Right? What information can we surface to the people making the decisions that they just don't have right now? Your example is such a good one, right? Because you will have always known that data is out there, but it just wasn't practical for you to read 100 reports. And the same thing applies for every single risk that pretty much every single risk that an underwriter looks at today, right? Is that there's a world of third-party data out there. And, for the biggest ones, if you're insuring the international group or you're insuring, Zenk, right, one of the Zencura and the biggest risks in the world, yeah, do you know what? It's extremely worthwhile for the actuaries and underwriting assistants and the underwriters to go and do as much research as they can to get that information. But you can't do that on every single risk, right? You can't do that. Whereas, so now I think, to answer the question, like the gaps that the models have, it's not necessarily even about the models. It's about like, what's the information that you put into them, right? I think our models actually, for the most part, it's not too difficult to design a model, that actually is very capable, but for the data that it doesn't have. And plugging that gap is just a key part of what we do. We talk about data, we talk about insights, so the mixture of facts, the mixture of judgments, and then the decisions that come out of that. Just the amount of data and insights that you can put into a model before you make decisions. So it should be 100-fold.
It should be 100-fold. And the quality of data is actually critical. But one thing which is happening, and as you are speaking, I'm thinking about my own experience as a business owner, right? I go to Lloyd's to get my business insurance, as we do in the world we are in. And, once upon a time, I remember it would take maybe 2 weeks to get a quote back. And today, in the summer, my broker reached out and within, I would say 24 hours, in 2 hours, said, Sabine, here is a new quote. Are you happy with it? And it is done, right? So fast quote to buying cycles are critical for us to differentiate. So partly when you have good risk, like the one you are seeing here. And so what competitive, I would say, strategies, how does agentic AI start helping carrier meet the needs of their brokers so that they can continuously differentiate and actually grow as well alongside the carriers they are serving?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's been so interesting because actually, ironically, for the last 20 years, the focus has been on what's been our bread and butter, right? The pricing and underwriting models and algorithms. Actually, what we haven't been able to do is do the very quick prioritization, the triage, right? The analysis of the fundamentals of a risk to work out whether you can say yes or no, or maybe quickly. I think one of the things that agentic capabilities have brought is the ability to do this, right? It's the ability to dramatically increase the quality of service, because for a very large amount of risks, quickly, right, whether you're in or out, right? And then the ones in the middle are what takes the time and effort, right? The ones where you're not sure.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing, we have a triage offering, right, that's being added to our suite of capabilities, right? And what we've seen really clearly is that using AI now, the AI has unlocked, particularly even before it was agentic, right? But the generative AI models have unlocked the ability to pull data so quickly out of the information required for underwrite that you can put a very quick red, amber, green status on these risks. Again, several orders of magnitude faster than ever before. And, I think when I talk to our clients, absolutely, they are obsessed about profitability, particularly in today's market. And that's, I think, a differentiating factor of the next generation of technology providers will be not just focused on the administrative side, but the actual optimization of profit, which is something we think about very deeply. But they also care about service. So I think, what we're seeing right now, and your example is a very pertinent one, is that the technology hasn't been able around to actually provide that service feedback loop as quickly as we can see. And, it's amazing, isn't it? You were saying 2 weeks and now a day, I think we've got, even in the specialty space, we'll get even faster, right? I think it'll be hours soon, right?
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Cyber and all those new risks that we are seeing, right? SME, cyber, I think the technology is there. And so now it's about the underwriter feeling comfortable to have enough data to actually win the risk. They are comfortable to win faster. And I think the term faster is a critical one right now. Right now.
Totally agree.
So another piece of research I was reading while getting ready for our conversation today, Amrit, is the multi-agent ecosystem. So McKinsey has put some research out describing multi-agent systems as those systems being able to handle intake, risk profile, pricing, and compliance together. Can you describe how hyperexponential or HX sees these agents working together and where the human underwriter comes into play?
Yeah. And, I think the analogy of, the human jobs to be done is the framework that we think about very deeply, right? When we're trying to build this technology for our customers. And while step changes are absolutely possible, the first place you start is on what's happening today. So, when you look at our technology stack, we have an ingestion agent, we have an actuarial agent, we have an underwriting agent. And in the same way that those jobs to be done were done by different humans in the past, they're done by different agents with different skills today. So, it's not too different in my mind from the way work was done before. Collaboratives, we use this fancy phrase swarm now, right? We don't talk about humans in swarms, but we talk about agents in swarms, right? A large group of different people, digital or otherwise, with skill sets collaborating very deeply is how you get the best results. HX has always been really obsessed about this feedback loop between the underwriter and actuary. And, my time in insurance for the last 20 years, doing it myself, I could see where the feedback loop was very tight between the underwriter and actuary, got incredible results. And now we're able to replicate that with a group of agents that work, 24/7. They don't get tired. They don't lose their patience. They don't, their performance doesn't degrade over time as long as you've got enough power for them, right? So I think, our take on this is very clearly, we have our infrastructure, the core Renew platform, the HX platform, right, which is the framework that people build, the decision-making tools that they've been doing for the last 7 years in HX. But that just now forms the substrate, right? It's the kind of core information that all the agents who want to work on the different jobs to be done can refer to. So, if you've built a very powerful rater in Renew, our ingestion agent can say, well, I know what the fields are that I need to fill out. So I'm going to go, armed with that information, I'm going to go and capture the information. Our actuarial agent can say, okay, this is great. This model has these type of parameters, right? So I need to go and actually do the analysis on the data sets to make sure I can calibrate those parameters. And the underwriting agent can say, okay, these are the most important factors in this model. So I'm going to go and do some research, right, on those factors. And so to me, it's like that human in the loop, and the human in the loop side, I think, sits really tightly across that, because these agents aren't going to be able to do everything themselves. In the same way that when I was a junior actuary, I had to go and get some help when I ran out, when I wasn't sure what to do. The humans are going to be there. So, it's not too different from what we've done in the past, just with a supercharged set of capabilities from these agents and the humans doing the appropriate guidance, judgment, conducting the orchestra, if you will.
Well, you just mentioned something that I actually heard over the past 3 weeks, working with various conferences and hosting webinars, which affect not only claims but also underwriting, is the fact that we are now recruiting younger underwriters. And so we need to find a way to build those teams. So using the technology as a teammate to enable the more experienced underwriters to train easily the younger underwriter. What is your experience with this? Because our industry is suffering from a talent gap. And so new underwriters are coming to market. I've heard it from US to Europe. All insurers have told me that over the past 3 weeks. How do we leverage the technology to help us there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an existential problem, I think, that we're going to see over the next couple of years in every sector, right? Because actually these models and technology get capable at junior tasks or they get capable at senior tasks. And so you can see, there's lots of studies being done that show how there's been a collapse in the junior job market. And so when I think about this challenge is existential, not just for these new underwriters who are coming in but for all people working in insurance and in the economy more broadly. And I think the really powerful thing that I think the technologies that are the cutting edge technologies available now is that they can be used not just to do the work, but to explain what they're doing. So if you have an underwriting agent, an actuarial agent, you could say, tell me what this algorithm does. Right? You don't need a rocket ship HX model developer or actuary to explain to you, right? You have it built in to our platform. You can copy a bit of code and say, explain this to me, right? But for me, I think this is going to go much further, because one of the things that we see particularly in insurance, where the transformation projects that we tend to see in our market, and that Ajax has driven, probably upward north of, approaching 50 of them now, is that they're very large in scale and they take time, right? And the moment that happens, knowledge transfer becomes such a key thing. People leave, people go on breaks, they have children, right? Many things happen. They get reassigned to other projects. And so what we're going to see now is a mechanism of institutionalizing the knowledge implicit in these systems, and having, again, an infinitely patient, infinitely scalable army of teachers to share that knowledge. And I think that's going to be a critical kind of gap filler for people, because the reality of the system is the situation is, even during busy renewal seasons, the underwriters and senior actuaries are busy enough as it is, right? So being able to go and ask someone or something, right, for some guidance digitally, I think is a huge unlock. So I think it's simultaneously causing a bit of the challenge in that people don't need to hire these people, but it's also going to be part of the solution, because it'll be able to do some of that teaching, that knowledge transfer itself.
I would like to dive into some of the capabilities. So I'm going to go a little bit technical, and you will tell me if I'm going right or wrong here. I read right on your website that you have that data ingestion library, right, to really tackle the mess which is out there when we think about submission by leveraging large language models. So can you share some example as to how that works, how we start maybe parsing data, reducing manual effort, improving the way we are dealing with underwriting and actual activities, whilst looking at age cases?
Yeah, great question. And so you're right, technology has moved very fast. And I think our website in the next few days will be updated again, because the data ingestion library is now our ingestion agent. And it's a very timely conversation. So I think, yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say, one of the things that's been really wonderful for HX is, by focusing on the core problem of understanding the data requirements of our clients for 7 years in their quest to make the most impactful pricing and underwriting decisions, we actually created a framework inside Renew for teaching agents what to do. And I won't tell you that when I set up HX in 2017 that I prefigured the rise of the LLM and ChatGPT. There's nothing to do with that. It's just that actually data has always been very important to us. And so when you build a model or you build a rater inside Renew, you have to, by design, you tell it the data that it cares about. And that data is used to be entered by a human or API, and then it's used to run the rating algorithm. The most beautiful thing about that is that you can get an ingestion agent if you were to build the ingestion agent, it already has all of the information inside Renew about the data that needs to be captured and what it's used for.
Nice.
And what we were able to do was build an agentic framework which can refer to the existing platform. It understands the data that needs to be captured. So you don't have to do any extra work on saying the information you need to capture, and it understands what it's used for. And so to answer your question specifically, what does that do? Well, it allows you to do things that many other systems can't do, right? Because before you've even started in Renew, you have an incredibly rich set of context, which is now an important phrase in AI, right? A rich set of context for the agents to work with. And that means we can do like very, very clever things, right? We can do things like address cleansing, which in many other providers, technology suites is a paid for extra feature that's a separate thing to buy. That's just a property that we were able to build into our ingestion agent incredibly quickly in weeks, right? We can do things like semantic analysis. So we can not just do transpositional, take data from a Word document and paste it into our model. We can read whole blocks of text and work out the intent of what that text means, and then fill out related fields inside a rater, right? Even though it's not a one-to-one mapping, because we have all of that extra context. And it means we can do just much more rich, much more intricate things than you'd be able to do if you just said, I care about these 5 fields. Right? That's the tiny subset of the information inside a system like ours.
Which is superb. So Amrit, as you are actually talking about the detail of the system, another question that comes often to me is, how do we ensure that everything we do is compliant by design? And so when we start looking at those agents, and you actually mention all the capabilities an underwriting team, an actual team, a successful team needs to have when they start using agentic capability, how do we ensure we avoid bias? We avoid errors, right? In a world where discrimination exists. Now we are going to systems helping us do the underwriting. So how do we avoid that, right? How do we ensure that the feedback loop is always there, always robust, to make sure that we adapt at the same time to current market conditions?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a really tough one. And I would, probably the sort of thing that people like Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg are worrying very deeply about, and that we think about hugely as well. So I'll say a couple of things. We've always had this challenge. We've been talking about these things for a really long time before the kind of rise of Gen AI. And I think what Gen AI has done is it's scaled the ability and velocity with which we can do this work. It has also added much more obscurity into the mechanisms by which it works, right? There's a whole new emerging field in machine learning called mechanistic interpretability, right? Which is actually being able to look inside these models and try and understand how they actually work, right? How the brains inside these gigantic matrix multiplication engines are actually working. And this field is incredibly new. There's loads of really fascinating podcasts out there on this. And if you're an ultra nerd, I recommend listening to some of them. I think, though, that closer to home, there's 2 parts to this. This is a problem of user experience, right? First and foremost, right? I think it's and we're very focused on this. It's incredibly important to us that the moment an agent expresses an opinion, it is unambiguously clear that the agent has done that and it's not a human. Right? And there needs to be an incredible degree of precision and auditability over every single judgment or decision or entry or any other interaction that an agent has with any system. Because the reality of the situation is that we are not going to solve, in the same way that we were never going to solve bias perfectly before, we're not going to solve it perfectly now. But if we can audit it, we can understand it, then we can put the appropriate judgment feedback loops on. We can set systems up for spot checks. We can set systems up to hoist those decisions and monitor them and analyze them. And, there's this concept of adversarial modeling. You can have a separate judgment and bias agent looking over the other agents, right, and actually supervising it. And I think we're going to see a whole ecosystem of this technology emerge that sits on top of the AIs that are just doing the work. I think some companies are very permissive, very AI native, very AI first. I was talking to one of our investors at Andreessen Horowitz about the rise of the full stack AI native carrier, right? These are coming now, and those companies will be actually probably a bit more permissive, a little bit more risk seeking in their attitudes to use of the agents. And then we talk to some customers who are just like, no, 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 no. Every time an agent does anything, I need to know about it. It needs to be logged and it needs to be auditable. So our job is to make sure the framework exists, that people can choose their own adventure, they can choose their own degree of comfort, and then we're able to service both ends of that spectrum.
When you think about the underwriters, right, they want to spend more time delivering quality, and they want to spend more time as well spending less time doing things which are mundane tasks. So how can customers using HX redeploy their time better as underwriters to actually drive value for the business?
I mean, this is the whole premise. It's a great question. It's the whole premise upon which our company exists. It's on, right, is that if you can shift the time from the mundane to the differentiated, the impacts are very, very significant, right? And you'll have the studies from McKinsey talking about 3 to 6% improvements from the loss ratio. You can take a conservative slice of that, which we do, and you still come up with a transformative impact to the company's bottom line, right? So I think there's a couple of things there. I think this question of what do we do with the time we save is a cultural and kind of general corporate thing. I always like thinking, my job as CEO is to think about the company strategy. And one of the key parts of company strategy is like, when you make an improvement to any system, where does the surplus accrue? Does the surplus accrue to the end users? Does it accrue to the company? Right. And this is a really good example, right? Like, if you free up the time for underwriters, you give them 2 hours back. What do? Do they spend more time on judgments? Do they spend more time on networking? They spend more time on TikTok, right? Who knows what they will do? It'll be different for every individual. But I think one of the most important things that we do when we're thinking about the later stages of transformation with our customers is to understand what they want to do with that time. But sometimes that time will still be inside renewal. It'll just be spent on other things, like maybe portfolio optimization, maybe more time on judgment, maybe more time reading the risk research and applying human in the loop. So my answer to that is a very typically actuarial answer. It depends, but it depends, I think, on the kind of the strategic direction that each client has with what they want their differentiator to be. The less cop-out answer I would give you is that we see very clearly people wanted to spend more time on the risks that are borderline. Right, that's the thing that we want. Like, the art of underwriting in a market that's turning is working out where to spend your time on not necessarily on a per risk basis, but between the risks, right? So I have a much more high degree of confidence that this one I can definitely say yes to, and this one I can definitely say no to. But these, they're 50% of the other risks where actually I'm not sure. I'm going to spend much more time on the underwriting of those, and we think that just has a massive leverage. Over compounding renewal seasons, right? People spending more time on the risks that are the differentiators.
Well, you are talking about renewal season, and a lot of people were, I think, at the rendezvous just a few days ago. So how do you see dynamic risk assessment moving forward, right? Do you have examples as to where AI-driven insight can actually improve decision-making? And what are your expectations, again, as we move to a world where agents are going to help us become better underwriters?
Yes. Yeah. So I was a reinsurance pricing actuary for the first 3 years of my life. So this time of year is very familiar to me. I was bracing myself, for very long days, long nights, weekends, evenings of underwriting and pricing work. So it brings back some nostalgia to think about that. So I'll say a couple of things here. I think what HX doesn't do is pretend that it's like pulled the future out of the universe. So I think we're at the very beginning of using AI for some of this portfolio optimization and insight generation. What I will say really clearly is it's no longer the case. When you started a renewal season in the past, you scrabbled around for absolutely ages trying to get all the risks from the last year, understand what your playbooks would be going into them. So I remember one of the renewal seasons I did myself, I had 41 risks price in like 3 weeks. It was excruciating. I was like physics bending stuff, right? And I remember the time running up to pricing those, I was like, I've got 41 renewals. I need to go and get all the information from last year. And I need to at least have a set of opinions about which risks are going to take my time, which risks I'm going to really want to be ready to fight for, which ones I'm not. Now, if you use a system like Renew, that's a database download. Right? It's not running around, copy off file, do not use. Which folder is it? Going to IT if there's an IT migration, saying, "Sorry, can you give me access to the R drive again?" So I would say we are substantially better prepared in the era that we are right now than we've ever been. As for AI, well, what rich fodder that data is to ask an AI. So, again, thinking about our agents, thinking about our portfolio optimization systems, going forward, probably by the end of this year, you'll be able to ask an underwriting agent, or certainly early into next year, you'll be able to ask the HX underwriting agent which risks it thinks that you need to spend some time on, and which rinky-dinks or edge cases, as you said before, or strange things did we do last year during those renewals that we definitely don't want to get caught racing to the finish line at 3 a.m. again doing this year. And so, I think we're going to be very, very clearly equipped, substantially more capably in the future to deal with these circumstances.
I wonder how far transparency can go. As you are mentioning, the HX agents enabling the underwriter to be more effective, but also probably more transparent with one customer. Me as a customer, would I be able to really understand my underwriting risk and actually, like I would do with my health, right? Know what are the things I need to do to improve my business so that I get better rate. So make it a little bit more external to the customer. I wonder whether that will be possible someday.
I hope so. Our long-term mission at HX is that if we can increase the productivity, collaboration, and sophistication of the way risk is priced and underwritten, well, then the world can take more risk. Right? So our big mission is we'll be very proud one day when the world takes a little bit more risk because of one little Renew model somewhere, HX model, helping an insurance company underwrite that risk. So, as part of that evolution over time, I do believe feedback loops are a key thing, right? In the same way that there's insurers in the UK, Vitality is a famous example, right, that tries to engender positive, productive feedback loops between the underwriting and the customer behavior. Why shouldn't it be the case that you can say, by the way, these 15 temperature sensors that we had in your energy in your oil rig, that you had 5 near misses next year, right? You need to change that. And obviously there's companies like FM that have been doing this for years, right, where risk engineering forms part of the feedback loop. But you would hope that we'd be able to share some of the insights from the pricing back. I would say the big block to this, in my mind, is not going to be the technology. It's going to be the competitive dynamic between insurers, the desire, brokers, the intermediaries inside our very complex, very long value chain market, appetite and desire for them to socialize that information, and actually, quite frankly, how that information can work. Because I'm a big, again, thinking about systems, one of the big things I like to reflect on is that system symmetric, right? So are you going to get to a situation where you can share good news only, or you can share or bad news only, right? Like, are the insurers going to go, by the way, if you keep doing this, we're going to make your prices go down, right? Who knows? Who knows about that? Those are very challenging questions to answer. But I don't think technology will be a blocker. I think we'll get more and more transparent ability for transparency.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think that the technology will be the blocker. It's more, I would say, the friction which exists in the market, and what is good business, which is going to be the things we need to think about. Which takes me to the broker, right? I mean, when you think about great underwriters who are there, how has their relationship with the brokers improve? I mean, do you have any feedback from the brokers who are actually working with insurers who are working with you?
Yeah, it's a good question. The broker relationship is so important and fundamental market. And I think, if you come from outside the market, the world is littered with casualties of people who just disrespected the role of the broker. And we said we would never do that, right? We have active pilots with brokers today. I went to see one of them yesterday. I'm in New York today, right? But right now. So I'll say this, right? I think the brokers probably, in the same way that the energy companies are the most motivated to understand renewable energy, brokers are going to be one of the most vested, groups of parties to understand algorithmic agentic underwriting technologies. And we talk to brokers who are super interested in the things we're doing there because they want to be just on the frontier, right? They don't want to just be a person who, a team who just share the information with the underwriters to do this. So, I think we're going to see breakthroughs in machine underwriting in the same way that we're seeing the brokers leading the smart follow, pushing the smart follow and algorithmic underwriting capabilities forward. I think it'd be very surprising to me if we didn't see brokers at least pushing the frontier or leading parts of the machine underwriting, AI underwriting missions in our market as much as the carriers, right? And to answer your question about, how have we seen broker relationships with people who use our systems? When I talk to them, they've often come to me because they hear, oh, we've heard about this AJAX thing, right? And it makes it much easier for us to get the data out and to share the information. And it turns out you guys can do DocGen, you can do all sorts of other things. How does this work for us? So I think, for the most part, and maybe I'm a bit biased here, the brokers are interested because they're hearing a little bit about this nudgy thing that's making the carriers more responsive and more capable. And I think, that's a good thing, right? In many ways, it just feeds up the value chain to motivate the brokers to be able to do the same thing. And I think that's been the core of the conversations we've had with the brokers is that, they want to be able to, in the same way that carriers want to respond quickly, brokers want to respond to RFPs very quickly. They want to be better at handling renewals. Brokers are a service industry. They want to surface insights to their clients, right? And ultimately, they want to win more business, right? They want to be there much more quickly. So it's not actually that different.
No, it should not be that different. Actually, one thing which also come to mind is the challenges affecting us with regards to governance and regulation and explainability, right? When we think about those models, they need to be transparent, as we just talked about, but also they need to be explainable, right? Fewer and fewer insurers will accept to work with companies which have what we call black box model, right? It has to be white box modeling. And so how do you ensure that you build trust with your clients and the regulators? Do you interact with the regulator in some ways, Amrit, to actually explain how your AI models are being built and to ensure that pricing and risk decisions are done in the right way?
Yeah, so we don't spend a huge amount of time directly with the regulator, probably the exception being the supervisory body that is Lloyd's, where we've got a long relationship with, we were with the cohort 3 for many, many years ago. I think that, probably not too unreasonable to say we've been one of the breakouts of the Lloyd's lab. So I think, so we don't interact with them directly. I would say that this explainability thing is never going away. It's only increasing. Our clients in any sector, I'll give you an example. Right? We are being pulled into and growing very significantly in the admitted markets in the US. It's an area where our technology is fundamental to many of our clients' plans to be able to address the explainability and to deblock the filing process, right? Because no one wants to get that wrong, right? So I think in this space, the pressure, the market pressure is only going to increase, particularly if we want to see increase in service and responsiveness at the same time as meeting obligations. And I think for us, I'll give you an example. You can ask our underwriting agent, why is this price so high?
Mm-hmm.
And it can go inside our system. It can look at the algorithms. It can do many very sophisticated things. It can use tool calls, as they're called, right? In the AI parlance, it can go and call many tools inside the Renew system to do that investigation. And I think AI has been a kind of breakthrough for systems that moved away from spreadsheets where you can follow the arrows, you can click the cells, to more algorithmic ones like ours, which were by design more opaque, right? That was a feature, not a bug in many places where people wanted to share their models and not have everyone see their IP.
Mm-hmm.
But now you get the best of both worlds, because you can ask an agent to say, well, tell me the key features that have led to this price going up, right?
Yeah.
And they can go in and inspect it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So We've talked a lot about the technology and the power of the technology, but we also know that we have a talent gap, but then we have a fear. We have fear of replacement. So what can you tell the market, right? The underwriters. So we are talking right now about the innovative underwriter, the one who knows agentic underwriting is coming and they are going to be empowered to do things better, faster, but also be more profitable. Let's talk to the fearful underwriter now. What would you like to say to those who may think that the technology is going to replace them?
Yeah. So maybe I made this joke last time, but I always say the robots will come for the actuaries first. So I say that as an actuary myself. I think, it's been very interesting to me over time. I was a London market actuary for 12 years, right? I spent time at the box with my team, being shouted at by brokers at the coalface. And I will say this, right? I think what we're seeing, and we're seeing it inside technology companies as well, we're seeing very clearly that technical skills, what do they call them? Verifiable domains, right? Technical skills where there exists a solution, a closed form, or at least, definitive solution to a problem. These jobs are being commoditized much more quickly than getting a broker to bring you some business, than networking, than convincing people to like you, right? This is a hard thing and it is not straightforward. And I've seen some extremely good underwriters, be amazing at this, learning how to say no, right, while maintaining the relationship. So the thing I would say is I don't believe that there's a fundamental epistemic or capacity-based ceiling on the work that anyone has to do, including actuaries, for the record, right? I think I don't know anyone in my current job or my past job as an actuary who goes, do you know what? I've just got a finite to-do list and I wish I could get it through more quickly. So I do really believe that we're not going to have replacement. I think all that happens, there will be transformation. Yeah, there will be transformation of roles. There will be elimination of old subsets of work, and that will make things difficult. I'm not glossing over this. I think there'll be some roles which don't exist in the future. But in terms of the aggregate capacity and requirements for every human inside a company, there's only going to be more work, right? It's become a cliche, this Jevons paradox, right? Which is the one that goes around, right? And so for our listeners who aren't so into the AI world, Jevons paradox refers to the way when you make a certain thing cheaper, right, the aggregate demand for it goes up and the amount consumption of it goes up more than the offsetting reduction in price. I think we're going to see that very, very clearly in the insurance sector, not least because insurance is the insurance gap is extremely large, right? There's trillions of dollars of
yes, 1.8 trillion, Amrit. It's not small.
That's it. So $2 trillion of cover that's yet to be born, right?
Yeah.
We've got plenty to do. And, the idea that we can go after that, yes, will we do it with the same skills we had before? No way. But can we now have more capacity to go and do it? And what is that? What does that mean for society, for global growth, for global risk taking, right? For our sector, for our market? It's only positive in the aggregate. But it will be tough for some people. There's no doubt about that. I'm not dismissing that.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, how do we address some of the biggest organizational barriers, right? We still have a lot of legacy systems. We still have a lot of cultural resistance. What have you seen in those organizations you are working with that they have been able to do better potentially than the others that need still to go through that transformation?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and one I think about hugely, right? Because I am the AI maximalist in our company, and I talk to our investors, and they go, "My goodness, like you are one of the most obsessed founders about this in our whole portfolio, right?" And I believe this is so important. So I'll say a couple of things, right? I think the first thing is to start with leadership. And I'm a massive believer in this. Anyone who's worked for or with HX will know that, I judge people by what they do, not what they say. Right? So I spend my weekends building NA10 pipelines, automated pipelines. I'm a massive fan of Windsurf, Cursor, Claude Code, right? Every possible tool you can think of, I use it myself. My chief of staff and I, on Sunday mornings at 6:30, we review the evals that we've built for our QBR pack together, and we test and learn and tune them together. And I'm like, no one does X faster or better than the boss, right? I'm a big believer in that. No one turns up to work earlier. No one works harder. No one is more AI native. So I think it has to start with leadership. I think that's the most important thing, right? And some of the most incredible companies that we've had the fortune to work with, Convex, we've worked with for many years. I remember talking with Paul Brand about how he'd set up the Expensify system himself. Right? So, yeah, I'm sorry, Paul, if people watch this, they don't know about this anecdote, right? Paul is technical. He gets it. And, when you have someone like that trickles across the company. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is you have to, and people have heard me say this, I say this pretty much every single presentation when people ask me this question, you have to optimize for change, not for results. And that's really hard for people to digest, right? Really hard for people to digest, particularly very large enterprises like insurance companies. It's much more important to optimize to be able to deliver chunks of delivery, right? Chunks of value, right? And iterate it and change it than it is to set yourself some extrapolated over a colossally long timeline, dreamy project. And I think that's something that is really hard. I find this hard, for the record, right? Like, these visions of what an incredible AI native system could look like. I don't even know what the capabilities in GPT-6 are going to be yet, right? I'll find out earlier than the average person because one of our investors is an investor in OpenAI, so I'll get a bit of an insight into it. But, who knows, right, what that's going to look like yet. So you have to optimize for change. You have to create a culture where people are more comfortable to experiment and throw away. And then I'd say the last thing, and I run my company this way, is you have to measure it. Yeah, you cannot optimize what you do not measure, right? So if you want to drive this change, right, you have to measure it. You have to play it back to people. You have to show people, hold up a mirror and say, look, these are the things that we can do. And, I'll say this, but I see this inside the transformations that we do. Once you can show some success and you can show value, it sorts itself out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. I have no doubt about it. So I would love for you now to give just a few recommendations, right? We are talking about insurance carriers. They are going through their AI journey. So when you start thinking about piloting agentic underwriting, where should they start? What would be your recommendation for them out there? Some of them will meet with you in a few weeks at IT Vegas.
Yeah, great question. So apart from come to us for all your agentic needs, which I'd be not doing my duty as founder to say that, I'll say, where do you start when it comes to agentic underwriting? I'm a huge believer that you start with the jobs to be done, right? And I think this is an extremely powerful framework, right? It's essential in technology, but it applies incredibly deeply in insurance, right? Like there is a low-hanging fruit workflow in every single underwriting team in the world that is absolutely automatable today. I'm willing to say I'm an actuary, so I rarely assign 100% or 0% probabilities to anything. But I'm going to go out there and say I'm confident that 100% of teams have one workflow that is absolutely addressable by an agentic orchestrated end-to-end pipeline. And if we even had 5% of the market realize those, right, 1% of the market realize those in the next year, that would be an incredible uplift. We're not aiming for 1%, right? I want like my goal is for every single one of our clients, to be a daily active or at least monthly active, weekly active users of our agents by the end of next year, right? But even if a tiny subset of them were able to find one job to be done, that would be touch paper for their companies. Absolute touch paper.
And so when we start looking at the fact that, and the research that the EY, Microsoft, McKinsey, all the top consultancy talk about that, the importance of modularity, flexibility, this flexible architecture, right, to avoid building tomorrow's legacy, how you make sure that everything you do is adaptable in the age of AI.
Yeah, it's a hard question. And, I think I'm a big believer that I say this inside my company, right? Trying to avoid tomorrow's legacy is a recipe to get nothing done, right? And so I would say pick the areas where they are reversible and they're testable. I probably wouldn't be looking to rip out and replace my core ledger system with an AI-based system today. Probably wouldn't be doing that. Maybe there are some, maybe if I was selling that software, I wouldn't be saying this, but, I wouldn't be looking to rip out like that, right? Those are systems that they're fundamental. You get them wrong, you get some hallucinations there, you're in real trouble, right? But I would say to avoid tomorrow's legacy, pick an area where you can afford to have some risk, right? And, I say this to our clients, like, how many of your spreadsheets are perfect? Yeah, how many of them really are completely error-free, that result in a really wonderful user experience, that aren't fragmented and messed up? So don't look tomorrow to fix all of those problems.
Yeah.
I would say understand two-way doors and the one-way doors, and go through the two-way doors as quickly as you can. Be careful of the one-way doors, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at 5 years from now, Amrit. What does the underwriting landscape look like if agentic AI adoption accelerate as an unpredictable speed? What does it mean from an emerging technology viewpoint? What does it mean from an emerging risk viewpoint? And the fact that we just don't only have the data within the insurance box, right? We are using IoT data. We are using digital twins. We are using all this amazing new tech coming to us. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Gosh, the world has changed so much in 6 months that 5 years. As an actuary, I try to avoid these predictions, but I'll give it a go. So what will I say? I always like the Jeff Bezos framework. What's not going to happen, right? No one's going to ask for slower customer service, longer delivery times, and more expensive products. So, I think we can use the same framework here. I think we're going to see a very significant improvement in service. I think that's an area that I think we'll be able to really materially drive over the next few years. I think really it is the era of the underwriter right now. I think it's going to be a situation where they can feel, for many years, they probably felt hard done by with the quality of life improvements that technology has brought to them. But I think you're going to see massive improvements there. I think you're going to see that in months, not even years. I really do believe in the power of the technologies that we're seeing today to increase the coverage, reduce the coverage gap. Right? I do think that. I think that's really, really, really key. And I think the reality is there's going to be whole new jobs. That's probably an area that I see really clearly. I think we're going to see a complete shift, actually, in the nature of the jobs that people do. Right? It is much easier now for a technical underwriter to do actuarial work than it's ever been before.
Absolutely.
And it's easier for an actuary to be a software engineer. So, I think maybe those are the predictions I'd say. Maybe more hybrid jobs, hopefully better coverage, better service.
100%. Lovely way to finish. Better coverage, better service. And then probably we become more curious. What I've learned in the age of AI, when I can't sleep at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm on ChatGPT asking questions about the world. So hopefully I hope I will be wiser, but also a much more informed person in the future. Thank you so much for joining me, Amrit. And I cannot wait to see you very soon at ITC Vegas, just in a few weeks. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.